Selling in Torrance right now can produce two completely different outcomes. And if you blur them together, that mistake can cost you real money. In one single family pocket, homes are moving in 6 days and closing at 103.1% of the last list price. In one condo pocket, inventory has expanded to 6.7 months. In another condo pocket, supply has tightened to just 1.3 months. So if you're thinking about selling in the next 3 to 6 months, the real issue is not whether Torrance is good or bad. The issue is whether your specific asset class and your specific zip code still have leverage, or whether you are walking into a comparison market that will make you negotiate from fatigue. Because from the outside, Torrance still sounds strong, but from the inside, it's splitting. Some homes still move fast, some sit, some sellers still have leverage, and some only think they do. The cleanest way to understand that is months of supply. That is the leverage meter. Lower supply means you have more control. Higher supply means buyers have more options and more patience. And this is exactly why citywide averages can mislead you. If you use one Torrance headline for every neighborhood and every property type, you can easily underprice strength or overprice weakness. I'm Hernandez, and my job is to help you make a clear decision around timing, pricing, leverage, and risk. So you don't hand back equity just because the citywide headline sounded simpler than the street level reality, because that is a trap. Your home does not live in Torrance. Your home lives in a very specific buyer pool with a specific tolerance for monthly payment, condition, location, and compromise. So here's the roadmap. First, I'll show you where speed still lives and what that means for you if you own a house in a truly competitive lane. Then we'll move on to the reset areas where supply is building and pricing discipline matters more than optimism. After that, we'll pivot to condos and townhomes, because that is where the biggest internal split in Torrance is happening right now. Then I'll give you the macro check, keep it tight, and connect it back to your buyer pool. Then we'll hit the structural changes that matter over the longer arc, and I'll land this with a clean bottom line for the next 3 to 6 months. Let's start where the market is still acting like a market with urgency behind it, because yes, that still exists in Torrance, but it is not citywide, and it is definitely not universal across property types. But before we go any further, please don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure that you're always alerted when these deep dive market update videos are uploaded. If I strip the noise out and translate the raw February numbers into neighborhood language, the clearest sprint lane is West Torrance single family. This is the buyer who wants the school story, the neighborhood feel, the livability, and the lack of shared walls, and who already understands that waiting around for the perfect discount usually means missing out on the house entirely. In West Torrance, single family homes are still moving in a median of 7 days. Supply is only 1.7 months, and that tells me something very specific. The buyer is still in the market, still liquid, still decisive, but no longer sloppy. That last price matters, because that lazy interpretation is 7 days? Great, I can name my price. No, that is exactly how a seller gives back leverage in 2026. West Torrance single family is fast, but it is not blind. Sellers there got about 99.6% of lists. So the market is saying yes to speed, but no to ego. Buyers are still writing quickly when the house is right, but they are not handing out charity. They are still underwriting the monthly payments. They are still comparing condition. They are still punishing overreach. There is also a second detached lane with genuine urgency, and it is even more extreme on speed. The Southeast Torrance Harbor Gateway adjacent single family entry lane. There, homes moved in a median of just 6 days, supply sat at 2.3 months, and sellers got 103.1% of list price. That is a real bidding environment. But I want you to hear the nuance. That is not broad luxury enthusiasm. That is entry-level desperation. Those buyers are not casually browsing. They are stretching for dirt, for a yard, for no shared walls, and for a foothold in the South Bay. So when the right single family home shows up at a payment they can still justify, they move. If you're a homeowner in one of those sprint lanes, your leverage is heavily concentrated in the first 7 to 10 days. That is the entire strategic point. Your leverage does not live in sitting around to see what happens. It does not live in floating 5% over reality because you like the 2022 comp better. It lives in opening opening at the number that makes qualified buyers feel like they need to act before someone else does. That is the regret minimization move, because when you own in a fast lane, the temptation is always the same. You say, well, if it's this type, maybe I should push. And sometimes that works in a truly euphoric market, but that is not the regime we're in. We are in a market where speed still exists, but buyer tolerance for nonsense has collapsed. So if you overprice in a sprint lane, you are committing one of the most expensive mistakes possible. Taking a neighborhood that was ready to reward you and talking it out of rewarding you. For the homeowner watching this, here is the practical translation. If your home sits in West Torrance, your edge is neighborhood quality and speed, but you still need discipline. If your house sits in the more affordable lane near Harbor Gateway or Southeast Torrance, your edge is scarcity at the right price point, and you may still have room for multiple offers. But in both cases, the first impression is the asset. The first week is the asset. Your price, prep, photos, disclosures, and showing strategy are not support details. They are the entire game. Now let's move into the lane where I think a lot of homeowners are at the highest risk of making an expensive emotional mistake, because this is where the market still looks strong from 30,000 feet, but gets much more selective once you get down to street level. The clearest, pure resets in the raw data is Old Torrance and Central Torrance, which is the 90501 single family lane. Active listings there climbed to 28, up sharply from 15 a year ago. Months of supply moved to 3.4. There were 16 new listings in February, but only 10 pendings. Sellers ended up at 100% of the last list price, but only 98.6% of the original list price. That gap tells the whole story. It means the market is not rejecting homes. It is rejecting the first number. And that is a very different problem than homeowners think they have. Most sellers in a resets lane do not lose because their home is unsellable. They lose because they use the wrong opening posture, burn the strongest buyer traffic, and then spend the next month trying to get back to the number they should have started at. That is not just a pricing issue. That is a momentum issue. And momentum is where sellers quietly lose real money. Now let's compare that to Hollywood Riviera and the broader South Torrance detached lane. This is where homeowners can get fooled by prestige. The February median sales price was $1,655,000. The median price per square foot was $836. Supply was only 1.5 months. On paper, that sounds like a market where you should be able to throw the house on the market and let the zip code do the work. That would be the wrong conclusion, because the same February file shows 37 days on market with sellers getting about 97.9% of the list price. That is the important tension. Hollywood Riviera is a high value market with scarce inventory, but the buyer is moving more slowly and more selectively than the low supply number alone would suggest. Why? Because Riviera buyers are not buying an entry ticket. They are buying a lifestyle asset with a much bigger check. At that price point, buyers become more deliberate. They compare view quality, street quality, floor plan, lot utility, deferred maintenance, school adjacency, and whether your house feels turnkey or feels like another project. So the market can protect value and still punish sloppiness. It can remain expensive and still make you wait. It can stay supply constrained and still refuse to reward an optimistic first number. That is exactly the kind of market that fools homeowners. If you own in Hollywood Riviera, the danger is not that your home has no demand. The danger is that you mistake prestige for liquidity. Those are not the same thing. Prestige means the neighborhood carries value. Liquidity means buyers will absorb your specific property quickly and on your terms. In February, Riviera-style single-family inventory still looks scarce, but the time to contract data says buyers were not behaving like they were under panic pressure. They were behaving like affluent, careful buyers who know they are writing a very large check in a market that no longer forgives mistakes. That should completely change your launch strategy. If your move is optional, Hollywood Riviera gives you the luxury of being selective about timing. But if your move is real, downsizing, divorce, relocation, estate planning, or getting equity out while the neighborhood still carries maximum prestige, then you need to approach this like an asset manager, not like a sentimental owner. You are not selling a story. You are selling certainty, condition, and fit within a premium buyer's budget. That means the right question is not what is the highest number I can try. The right question is what number gives me the highest probability of preserving my equity without getting dragged into a 30 to 45 day negotiation spiral. That is a much smarter question, and it is the exact emotional reset homeowners need in 2026. Now we get to the part of Torrance where city averages become actively dangerous because the condo townhouse housing market is no longer one story. There are at least 3 separate stories happening at the same time, and if you own a condo or a townhome, you absolutely cannot afford to use the wrong one. Let me start with the sharpest contrast in the data because it tells the story better than any headline can. On one side, you have the Harbor Gateway Southeast Torrance condo lane. This is the part of the market where inventory has clearly blown open. In February, active listings hit 32. Months of supply reached 6.7. There were 15 new listings and only 4 pendings. Read that again because that is the real leverage story. 15 sellers came in, 4 buyers stepped up. That is not a balanced market. That is a market where supply is getting ahead of absorption. Now compare that to West Torrance condos and townhomes. That lane tightened to 1.3 months of supply. Active inventory dropped to 10. There were 8 pendings against only 5 new listings. Sellers got 102.6% of list price. Same city, same broad mortgage environment, same month, totally different physics. That is the comparison lane in one frame. So let's slow it down and make it useful. If you own a condo in Harbor Gateway, your problem is not just the condo market is softer, your problem is that your buyer can compare too many nearby interchangeable alternatives in the same weekend. That changes the entire psychology of your listing. The buyer does not have to emotionally attach to your unit. The buyer can say, I like this one, but I'll go see 3 more. That is where leverage disappears. And here's the trap that a lot of sellers fall into. They look at a few closings and see that some units still sold near or even slightly above list, and they conclude that the market must still be healthy. That is too shallow a read. In an oversupplied condo lane, a few properly priced or especially clean units can still transact well, but the broader market structure is still soft if the shelf is full and the pending count is weak. The real question is not whether one seller got lucky. The real question is whether your buyer has alternatives. In the Harbor Gateway style condo inventory right now, the answer is yes. That means that if you own there, your launch has to do 3 things at once. It has to remove price friction, it has to remove condition friction, and it has to remove comparison friction as much as possible. In plain English, you do not win by being fine. You win by being clearly better than the next 2 units the buyer sees online. Now let's look at the opposite end of the condo townhome spectrum. If you own a condo or a townhome in West Torrance, the market is behaving like a compressed affordability funnel. Buyers want the neighborhood, they want the schools, wants the lifestyle, but they cannot comfortably stretch into the single family West Torrance pricing. So they slide down 1 rung on the ladder and hit the townhome and condo inventory hard. That is why that lane can have only 1.3 months of supply and still post 102.6% of list. It is not because condos are universally hot, it is because that specific lane is functioning as a fallback entry point into one of the most desirable parts of the city. That is real leverage if you own there. But even there, I would tell you not to get cocky, because scarcity in one condo townhome pocket does not erase softness across the broader condo market. It simply means your unit lives in an exception, not the rule. You still need to launch cleanly. You still need the right photography, the right positioning, the right showing cadence, and the right number. The difference is that in West Torrance condos, the market is more likely to reward you for doing that work. In Harbor Gateway, the market may still make you fight even when you do everything right. And then there are the middle lanes, where you really need fresh comps instead of headlines. Condos in North Torrance are one of those. On paper, supply there is only 1.3 months, which sounds tight, but median days on market stretch to 46, and sellers got only 95.7% of the original price. That is the kind of lane where the broad statistic can mislead you. Low supply does not automatically mean easy leverage if the individual properties are uneven, if the HOA profile creates friction, or if the buyer is discounting for unit level compromises. Condos and townhomes in South Torrance is another one. That segment sits at 3.2 months of supply, which is not catastrophic, but it is no longer tight. The median original price retention fell to 97.2%, and the median sales price dropped sharply month over month. A move I would not overinterpret as a true crash because the sample was thin, but I would absolutely treat it as a warning that demand for condos in that lane is less resilient than the single family home demand in the same broader South Torrance geography. That split is one of the most important strategic insights in this video, because when a single family homeowner in Hollywood Riviera or South Torrance says, my neighborhood is still strong, they may be right, but if the condo rung just below them is softening, that matters. Why? Because the housing ladder is connected. Tomorrow's single-family buyer often needs to sell today's townhouse. If the townhouse layer clogs, some of the single-family buyer pool disappears. Not because they don't want to buy your house, but because they cannot liquidate the property they need to sell first. That is why I keep coming back to regret minimization. If you own a condo in the softer comparison lane, the wrong move is to tell yourself your unit is too special to compete. Buyers do not pay for your memory. They pay for their alternatives. If you own in the tighter condo lane, the wrong move is to assume the citywide condo softness does not matter. It does matter. It just matters less where scarcity is still intact. So the clean seller first translation is this. If you own a condo in Harbor Gateway, Southeast Torrance, you are entering a comparison war. Your buyer has time, choices, and negotiation runway. If you own a townhome or a condo in West Torrance, you may still have real leverage because your product is functioning as the affordability release valve into a premium neighborhood. If you own in the middle condo lanes, you need sharper comp work than anywhere else because that is where broad narratives break down fastest. And that is why I do not want you to make a list now versus wait decision based on the Torrance condo market. That phrase is too broad to be useful. The condo market here is fragmented. Your lane matters more than the headline. So let me give you a clean scoreboard. If you're an owner in the sprint lane, your edge is still speed, but it only pays you if your first impression is sharp. If you're an owner in the reset lane, your biggest risk is not that there are no buyers, it's that buyers are more selective than your original price expects. If you're an owner in the comparison lane, citywide softness is real, but the condo story splits hard between oversupplied pockets and tight ones, so using one condo narrative for your unit is a mistake. And if you want this scoreboard translated into a sell now versus hold decision for your exact address, that's where an address-specific strategy session matters. Now zoom out with me for a second because there is a macro layer sitting over all of this. The broader backdrop is giving buyers a little more room mathematically and a little less confidence emotionally. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate averaged 6% as of March 5, down sharply from 6.63% a year ago. The Fed is still holding the federal funds midpoint at 3.625%. February payrolls came in at a negative 92,000 and the housing affordability index rose to 116.5, the best reading since March 2022. What does this mean for you if you sell? It means your buyer pool has a little more payment oxygen and a lot less tolerance for nonsense. Buyers can qualify a little more easily than they could last year, but they are still looking for the reasons to be careful. The macro report is very clear about this. Sellers need pricing realism, strong presentation, and low friction transactions if they want to defend proceeds in a market where affordability is improving but labor confidence is softening. So this is not a panic market, and it is not a euphoric market either. It is a market that rewards clarity and punishes sloppiness. I'm curious, what's your biggest concern right now? Pricing too high, waiting too long, or selling and then feeling stuck when it is time to buy again? And tell me what part of Torrance you're in because the answer changes dramatically depending on the neighborhood and the property type. There is also a longer-term structural layer here that matters, not because it overrides the next 90 days, but because it helps you understand where the pressure is building. The first structural issue is the higher for longer rate environment, because even with mortgage rates improving, financing is still much tighter than the cheap money years, and the Fed holds means buyers remain selective and payment sensitive. The second structural issue is the housing ladder itself. When attached inventory builds and attached buyers struggle to move, detached liquidity can eventually feel that pressure. The third structural issue is seller psychology. A lot of owners are still mentally anchored to the frenzy years, and that anchor is exactly what creates stale listings in a market like this. So if you're a long-term owner, those structural forces matter. But if you're deciding whether to sell this spring or summer, they do not override the immediate reality of the supply, buyer behavior, and how your specific segment is absorbing right now. And that brings us to the real conflict in this market. It is scarcity versus friction. Scarcity is still protecting the best detached lanes and the tightest attached pockets. Friction is building through more comparison, more price sensitivity, more selective buyers, and less tolerance for mistakes. And doing nothing is still a decision. If you plan to sell in the next 3 to 6 months, waiting is not neutral. Waiting means accepting whatever inventory build, buyer, mood, and competitive set shows up later. So if you're going to make a move in Torrance this year, do not make it off city headlines. Make it off your lane. If you want me to help you build the real plan for your address, not the generic version, use HomeBot. The link is in the description, or book a one-on-one strategy session with me below. No pressure, no hype, just clarity. Because in a market like this, you do not need louder opinions. You need a flight plan for your equity so that you are not making a 6-figure decision by feel. I'm Mr. Hernandez, and I'll see you in the next video.